So it looks like it is finally time for the two most important cities on Azeroth, Orgrimmar and Stormwind, to get their revamp to finally be updated. We already had NPCs talking about how Orgrimmar, for example, should get a new port soon, how empty parts should be expanded upon. However, with the official Blizzard article on player housing, the picture is even clearer now. Well, the article talks about neighborhoods being instanced areas inspired by Durotar and Azshara and Elywnn Forest and Westfall. The artwork they showed heavily implies that these will be on the outskirts of the city where we will actually have our houses. Can you see the houses within the Durotar cannons? While the two capitals may not get a full makeover, the hints we have is that they will soon look quite a bit different to accommodate this new massive feature, which should also pull even more revamps. So what is everything we currently know? You can actually play War Within on your phone with Elywnn, this video's sponsor. Check in on your characters or just play the game, as you can control your PC with your phone completely free. Elywnn is super easy to use. Check out the link and download the PC and the phone app and just connect it. The free version itself is amazing. You can control your desktop, transfer files, but the real deal is the game version. It has custom keyboards for various games other than just WoW, and you can enjoy AFK gaming at any time, anywhere with game sound. Make sure to use my code Doronsmovies to get 7 days completely free, only for the first 200 people. Startable Gaming is they got hot sales up to 40% off on Pro and Game versions. Check out Elywnn. So by now it's been about 2 weeks since the initial announcement of the player housing. We've learned a few months back on that WoW conference they had that we are getting player housing. Then a few weeks back we data mined some strings, and now Blizzard officially released a whole article that you probably saw already, explaining to us how this is all going to look like. Some of it is exciting, some of it is not as exciting, because what I fear the most turns out to actually be true, but it's not as bad as I thought it could be. We knew housing definitely wouldn't be Garrisons 2.0 with just an illusion of choice, but what I wonder the most personally is whether we would be able to choose from like 12 different locations, or whether they're unfortunately going to do like 2 locations, one for the Horde, one for the Alliance, just like the Garrisons, and unfortunately they decided to go for this option. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, because they did say that this is just for the start of this new feature, so I think the Durotar and the Elywnn Forest neighborhoods are going to just be the start. They did heavily imply that more locations would be added later down the line. This is just for the start. They also stated that they had discussed this heavily. They don't want to go crazy on a million different locations all across Azeroth, as they feel the players would be spread out too far and the social factor would be gone if everyone was just living in their own corner of Azeroth. Now this is of course understandable, but the way I feel like it is going to happen is that we are getting the Stormwind and the Orgrimmar neighborhoods now before actual midnight release, and when midnight releases they're very likely going to expand it at least to Kualtalas, but potentially Lordron as well, to have at least a few more options. Let's be real, it is kinda lame for the Blood Elves to live in Durotar. It literally doesn't make any sense, and also for the Dwarves to live in human-like houses near Stormwind. There is just nothing similar about it. It just doesn't fit at all. However, based on the artwork they proposed and some other hints, what I feel like a lot of people are not seeing, and you can see this when you read a little bit between the lines, is that an actual revamp of Orgrimmar and Stormwind seems likely, at least to an extent. I've made multiple videos on this in the past with a gradual revamp happening, but if you missed it when the War Within was released, we got an Earthen NPC from Castlegar in Orgrimmar talking about how there is just so much room left in Orgrimmar to expand the city, how it doesn't really look like a true capital of a faction as big as the Horde, and how those canyons can be used, and also the port can easily be expanded within the city. Now, when you combine this with the artwork that Blizzard just presented us in that official article, you can see that the houses seem to be layered in Durotar within these actual cannons that they had previously discussed. Now, check out what they told us. They did state that the neighborhoods will be both private and public with up to 50 different plots of land, so you will have active living neighbors. It won't be an isolated, unfortunate experience like the Garrisons. However, it will be instanced. It seems like this will be sort of a zone within a zone. They didn't say you're going to live on the outskirts of Orgrimmar and Stormwind specifically, but based on the artwork and what they said, it seems to be heavily implied. Just check this out. They told us that the Horde Zone is inspired by Durotar, the coastline, and Azshara. Now, the way you read this, it seems like they're going to add a new island off the shore, but just think about it. I mean, this is literally describing Orgrimmar. Orgrimmar is in Durotar, right on the border of Azshara. You can go into Azshara on the other end of Orgrimmar, and they're talking about the coastline, and Orgrimmar is literally on the coastline itself. So it really seems like they're going to settle us around those hills near Orgrimmar between the coastline, which should actually completely logically imply that Orgrimmar is also getting revamped together with this new giant player housing update. Obviously, I mean, they're not going to just add these neighborhoods with a random portal on top of barren land, like where we already have all those portals to the various, cataclysm zones. Almost certainly, it will be a seamless transition, and the city is going to get expanded upon, despite the fact that this part will be instanced. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna have like a million different plots of land. I mean, that would lag pretty much any PC that exists. This actually perfectly matches with the hint that the Earthen that arrived in Orgrimmar told us. He said there is so much empty land around Orgrimmar, how new forges can be added, how Orgrimmar needs a real port. All of this is so realistic because crazy times are ahead of us, and Orgrimmar will need a strong port to launch the expeditions to Qualtalas and Northrend once again. Keep in mind, this line was actually added to this Earthen when player housing was already deep in production, so I feel like it is highly realistic that Orgrimmar is getting enlarged and revamped, maybe slightly shifted with some newer areas to accommodate the upcoming neighborhoods. It also makes sense they would get a house in the suburbs of the capital instead of some random new zone that they just made up. Now, when it comes to Stormwind, here they're talking about how the zone is inspired by Elven Forest with only touches of Westfall and Duskwood. This also perfectly matches what I'm talking about. Not as perfectly as Orgrimmar, but just take a look at the map and think for yourself. Stormwind is right at the top of Elven Forest, but the bottom hills are matching the outskirts of Westfall. Can you see all those empty hills between these two parts right around Westbrook? This is also where Elven Forest meets Duskwood as well. Keep in mind what they said. Orgrimmar is right on the border of Azshara and Durotar, so they told us that it is inspired by Durotar and Azshara and the coastline. For Stormwind specifically, they told us that the neighborhoods will be inspired by Elven Forest mainly, with only touches of Westfall and Duskwood. I know it might make a bit more sense to be inspired by maybe the upper areas, but it actually doesn't. I mean, Westfall and Duskwood are like the Alliance areas, the most notable areas that everyone is familiar with. So realistically, it really seems like these neighborhoods are not just going to be shoehorned in randomly, but that they will be a part of a natural expansion of our two capitals. Another bit of logic when I'm coming with this is because they said for the start that this will be added to just the Horned Alliance capital, but it seems like they will add more. By the way things are going, it doesn't seem like they're going to add neighborhoods to every player capital. However, I think they want to bunch up a few things here as well. It really does seem like that in Midnight we're getting part 2 of the player housing neighborhoods. First of all, they talked about how Silvermoon will be enlarged and different. Very likely those destroyed parts will be fixed, where they will add new player housing. This way they can concentrate it, but they don't need to spread it too thin. So you will have more primal, rougher areas for housing around Orgrimmar, which would work well for races like the Orcs, Trolls, and the Tauren, while the other plot of land around revamped Silvermoon might be the more refined areas for other races. So, for example, the Blood Elves would have a completely different aesthetic for their houses. Furthermore, if more things happen in Midnight, they could do something similar to Gilneas or Undercity for another version, so like a Lordron version. So really, I was talking for years about how they're settling every race slowly for this player housing, and while now it doesn't seem to be fully the case, it also doesn't eliminate this theory. I mean, obviously, based on the official article, it doesn't seem like every race capital will have their own neighborhoods, but it also seems like more areas will have it rather than just Orgrimmar or Stormwind, so they will very likely be added in future expansions. Honestly, I think they want to monitor how the player housing is going to perform before they start spreading it out more. I really think it would be great if player housing is actually a seamless part of the capitals, and that it really feels like we're living in the city or around it at least. I think it will be totally lame if this was some portal island, some instance area that doesn't even feel like it is a part of the world, like that you can just completely ignore. So for the start, since we are getting Elven Forest and Durotar, it is heavily implied that these two major capitals, two most important cities on Azeroth, will finally get revamped. Very likely not completely. I mean, don't expect Stormwind to now be Suramar 2.0 that looks entirely different, but do you remember that area, for example, that was destroyed in Stormwind back in Cataclysm, and then it was updated with new graphics, or the port that was updated, that kind of fit seamlessly with the city. I think something along those lines will be happening to accommodate player housing, and we will see more surrounding areas affected by this as well. In terms of Orgrimmar, I'm expecting some of those empty hills to be populated to add player housing, and for a legit port to be added to the Horde capital. It is crazy that the Horde has some ratchet makeshift port that can barely fit 2 ships, and they're supposedly launching worldwide expeditions from this place. I mean, it's hilarious when you compare the Stormwind port to the Orgrimmar port. For the Alliance, I don't think the port will be a focus, but more outdated parts may be fixed. We might get a more natural expansion of the city, because remember, supposedly Stormwind is a gigantic city with more than 1 million people living between the walls, which I feel like might at least slightly be better represented in the game soon. Thanks for watching. Check out the most likely build races by clicking on the screen, and check out my raid channel by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.